Hi, welcome to the DIY Photo Organising Podcast. I'm Fiona from Photo Helper.
And I'm Chantal from Simply in Order Photo Organising. Imagine you can find any photo at any time at the click of a button. We are here to show you how.
So let's get started. Well, welcome back to another episode of DIY Photo Organising, and today we're going to be talking about, will your photos survive a disaster? Hi Chantal, how are you?
Hi Fiona, good. How are you?
Very well. All right, so we've got a bit of an interesting one today, this episode. What we're going to do is, Chantal's got some great experience and spoken about this at a few of our local libraries and things like that. So I'm going to do a bit more of an interview of you today, Chantal.
Okay.
But we'll just, we'll just be sharing both of our experiences in this area. But we just think coming into our Australian summer, it's a very timely episode. You know, we've had, unfortunately, some experiences in our area that has, hit disaster. And so we just thought it would be a really great opportunity for anyone listening out there even to share with others that might be in other disaster-prone areas or had examples or experiences of that themselves. So we're going to be talking through what natural disasters are, how this, that could affect photos. So we'll go through that with you, and we'll just talk about maybe what we're calling a plan A. So planning for the worst in a hurry if there's something urgently that happens that you need to address. Plan B, which is preparing for the worst but in an ideal situation. So we'll explain what we mean by that. And then, we obviously don't want to just keep this all doom and gloom, but we do want to make this a realistic episode for you guys to really just be practical and be proactive and get things happening first. Before a disaster hits. So let's jump right in. Chantal, so when we're talking about natural disasters, what sort of things have you experienced, or do you think that we'll be able to cover and just, experiences and a bit of background and apart from the obvious, but shed some light on that for us.
So, as you mentioned before, we were in Australia at the time of the recording. It's spring, so we're heading towards summer, and summer in Australia gets really hot and dry. It's very bushfire prone. Obviously, it depends a bit where you live. It might be a bit different when you live up north in the tropical area, but even there, you can have bushfires that destroy so much land and unfortunately oftentimes also property, if not even lives. And that's what Fiona was referring to before, that in Victoria, very close to our home, we had the so-called Black Saturday in 2008, February, that destroyed a lot of homes, and unfortunately a lot of lives were lost too. So for me personally, I was affected only in terms of we live very close to where that happened. And
actually, I think it was 2009.
2009?
Yeah, it's been 10 years. It was just 10 years.
Yeah, 2009. That's right. Yeah, that's right. We were still fresh in Australia.
Yeah.
that was really an eye-opener, shock.
It was a lot of people.
And it was really, it wasn't traumatic for us because we haven't lost anything. We were lucky in that the wind turned, otherwise our house might have come under attack as well, and we would have been completely unprepared because we didn't grow up in that environment. We're not used to that, being Swiss. Nothing ever happens there in terms of natural disasters, but and I know Fiona and her family has gone through a traumatic loss in that
very
fire.
Close to home. Everything was lost. And so, and even still today, it's a part of our kind of general conversation that we won't have that because it was lost in the fire. It's just everything.
I can't even imagine how It's terrible.
So it's real, and
Mm.
and I think one of the things that we were talking about too, just as far as disasters, is that's where we're at as far as our
Mm.
season coming into that.
Yeah,
But what other
yeah.
kind of disasters? I know that we've, within our industry, we hear about this
Mm.
and we talk about this within our, APO group. Quite regularly we'll see
Mm-hmm.
different things, unfortunately, that have come up.
Yeah.
So some of those things that we, would
Mm.
consider that as a natural disaster, obviously, are other things as far as water
Mm.
damage. So we've got,
Yeah.
a whole range of different parts of the
Mm.
world.
Mm.
And, that's a real example, it's a real risk,
Yeah. Yeah.
is flood.
Yeah. Hurricanes,
Hurricane
all that. Yeah.
storms, even
Mm.
up in Queensland, if we're in
Mm.
Australia, talking just local in Australia, in
Yeah.
our different, seasons that we have
Mm.
up there as well.
Mm.
And another one in my family, actually, we had Cyclone Tracy, which was going back many years now, in
Right.
the 60s, I
That
think,
was in
or
Darwin?
70 in Darwin.
Yeah, that's a long time
And
ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
my family, again, loss of home. And
Oh,
so
no.
that's just, again,
Okay.
yeah, so there's a lot of areas
Mm.
that obviously are hit by that. So,
Mm.
so what other things we've got?
Yeah, well, you mentioned flooding, earthquakes, maybe not so common in Australia, but obviously in parts of America it can be quite common. And look, in reality, how big is the risk that we're ever going to go through that? It might not be very big, but on the other hand, to prepare for the worst doesn't need to be as bad as it might sound or as
Yeah.
much work as you might imagine. It certainly does involve some preparation work, but it's like with any insurance. When you have it, hopefully nothing's
Yes, you
going to
won't
happen.
need it. Exactly.
You won't need
Hopefully,
it.
you won't need it.
But look, it is just the reality, and also we're talking about natural disasters today, but of course things can also happen without having a natural disaster. You can have a house fire for other reasons,
Exactly.
or a flooding. And I actually have a long-standing client who's lost some photos in a house fire, so nothing to do with any natural disaster, but it's been very traumatic nevertheless. And it's not only the fire that can be damaging photos or other possessions, it's also, in that case, it was actually more water damage from when they
extinguished the fire.
extinguished the fire, and also smoke damage. Even now, after years, that had happened about 8-9 years ago, the fire, you can still smell the smoke on the printed photos. It's quite, they're a bit smoky looking too, but they can be scanned and saved. So that's what we've done. That's a good thing. But again, think further than just fire and it's all gonna burn and go up in flames. It can absolutely be other damage too.
Yeah.
And not necessarily everything has to be lost 100%. And as you mentioned before with the APO, there's quite a few photo organisers in the States who have been helping to salvage photos after disasters, after floodings, storms, where photos got really, really badly water damaged, and they were able to restore some.
That's true, and I think it's a really good thing to let our listeners know on that, is because if that has happened. Don't just throw them out. Reach out for some help, because there really are some techniques and ways that you can save. The photo, the image itself, and very important to keep safe with mildew and wearing masks and gloves, and there's some real risks involved, and it's definitely important to have it done properly. So we would really encourage you. So I think that's why this episode is really important. Just when we're talking about natural disasters, just we've always talked about and encouraged for people to have a look at their projects and their plans and know their why, and they're often just to sort of deal with the mess or to achieve an outcome with a goal in mind. And this is just an area we haven't really touched on. We'd like to really encourage you to think about that as being one of the purposes for organising photos. But we've got some key steps and things like that for you to consider to give you a real plan.
Yeah.
And what to do to prepare.
And also the reason why we were talking a bit about what different disasters can happen, that's important to have a think about in terms of how to store your photos or albums, because there are containers out there that are waterproof or water resistant or fireproof. So they're built for that purpose. And when you do live in a flood prone area, obviously that's what you're gonna look for.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So
all right, so plan A. This is our prepare for the worst if you've got no time. So if you really just, it's an urgent, you've got a very limited time to get out, what are the things to think about and the steps, some of those things to take? What's your first sort of tips here, Chantal?
So first of all, what we're saying, if you're time poor and don't have a lot of time to prepare, so what I think is also important to know, you've got time to prepare that now, because that might take a little bit of time to get ready to grab your photos and run, so to speak. So it will take a little bit of time to prepare, but then when the fact happens, it should happen fast because you're ready. So first of all, what I would do is to write down a plan. Think about a plan. You know your home, the layout, where your car is parked. So as an example, in my own home, so we've got a garage and a carport, and I would store things that I want to grab when I need to run as close as possible to that door that leads into the garage or the front door, which is very close. Because normally my car is actually parked outside on critical days, because if the power goes off, I will have to open my garage door manually, which is possible, but you lose valuable time.
Yep, definitely.
So I know this might be going a bit too far.
No, but I think it's good.
But it's like, walk through for yourself, think through these steps and try to match in. And I know that's hard and reality might look totally different, but still try to walk through that process step by step, imagining what would happen. What would you do if your house goes up in flames? What do you need to do? And walk through that in your mind and write it down, have a plan. And if you do live in let's say in a bushfire prone area like we do, you are always, every year, the fire brigade, they always encourage you to create a plan, a fire plan, what to do. And obviously that involves a lot more than photos, but photos are on the top of the list.
Absolutely. Every time we talk to someone and they say, I haven't organised my photos yet, but, but if I ever had there was a fire, then that would be the first thing I'd grab. And so we know that is a top priority for people.
So as you can see, it should really be, the photos should be part of a bigger plan for your disaster plan, wherever you live, whatever it might you might be prone to. Also, that's a bit of an extra tip that doesn't have a lot to do maybe with photos, but because these days everything is digital and on your computers and phones and iPads and what have you. I like to write out a checklist listing all your electronic devices and have a bag ready or a box ready, so that in an emergency all you need is the checklist, and go and grab all your electronics, throw them in a bag and go. Because when we panic, in an emergency, that you can't think straight. So checklist is a good thing to have.
That's fantastic. Yep, absolutely. That's a great idea. And so on that plan, we'd be encouraging people to put those items in a place that's easily accessible. I know that we've talked in our golden rules, obviously, about, gathering everything together. We're creating a hub, but let's, we're focusing here on a situation. Yep, in an ideal world, that's all done, and you'll know where that is. But if that's not the case, then you are looking at just preparing for in a disaster or things. This is definitely that step. Yes. And it's really being aware of that. So some of the tips maybe as far as, being able to transport some of those things.
Yeah, so what I would do is to gather everything that you don't need on a daily basis. So not your phone, obviously, or your computer, because you use that all the time. But you probably don't use, DVDs or old hard drives or your albums or your slides or photos that you haven't scanned yet or something like that, USB sticks. You don't usually access these things every day. So gather everything, box it up so it's ready for you just to grab it and get it out.
Yeah.
If you want to go a step further, you can... again, I'm coming back to the bushfire prone area. You could box it up and store it in a safer place during summer.
Yep.
Now that's got pros and cons, because especially with things like photo albums, the idea of a photo album is not to be buried somewhere in a storage unit. You want to enjoy it. But look, that's... you got to find make your own decision about that.
Yeah.
And when you box things up, albums and photos, they get heavy really quickly. So you want smaller boxes, not like massive, 70-liter containers, because they tend to become too heavy. And also it's easier to stack smaller boxes maybe in the boot of your car, and that rather than huge massive ones that you can't even carry alone. So when you've got loose photos, make sure that ideally you would store them upright so they stand in a box. And not too loose, but not too tight either. So because you don't want them to sort of fall over and get bent, you know what I mean. Again, that's where possibly fire or water resistant bags can come in, or safety boxes. There's a whole range of products out there. There are at one stage I found bags, they would hold an A4 paper.
Okay.
And they were fire and water resistant, not proof. So that's another thing. Resistant and waterproof is not the same thing. And waterproof, even that, it's not going to hold up forever. It might hold up for a certain amount of hours and then it starts leaking. So, but it's better than nothing.
Yes.
Or, so you might want to check out and ask Google what's out there, because that would be something, for example, to consider to store also an external hard drive in.
Yes.
To keep it a bit safer.
Fantastic.
So, that's what I do, to just box it up and then either keep it at home somewhere, as I mentioned before, ready to go, close to the exit, or you might have a bunker where you want to store it in, or take it away from home. Personally, we've got a storage unit away from home, and that's where I keep everything that's not digitized.
Because you are living in a fire prone specifically. A little bit further away, from or closer to the fire area than me.
And I'm still working on digitizing everything. So whatever is not digitized yet, that sits in that away from home. Which is not great, but it's a step. Absolutely. And I think that's what we'd encourage you to do, if listening.
Just, you, in an ideal world, you'd have everything already backed up and cloud-based and everything digitized. But the reality is that, that's not the case, even as photo organisers.
We should do an episode of Confessions of a Photo Organiser.
That's true. And I know. those photo books, those beautiful. I do have some. I do have
me
some.
too. Me too.
But I've got my dream ones that I don't have yet.
Yeah.
It'll happen.
Do that.
I know. Let's do that. But definitely, in an ideal world. So I think if there's, even if there's just some of these tips that we can be helping you to really just take some action and make some of those decisions, which is good. But yeah, in an ideal world, we'd all have them digital, safe, and at a click of a button, they'd all just be back. But it's that it takes a lot of time
to get to that point. And also, it's little details. That's why I'm thinking it's important to really think well about the plan, because if you are someone who has tons of albums, that's not going to be realistic that when you need to run to fill, you might have enough time to put it all into your car, but maybe then your boot is full and you can't take anything else. And you will have other stuff to take. Yeah. First of all, people and pets. And then the photos, and then you might have other stuff
of some kind.
So it might be too much to take everything. So you might even have to make a decision and only pick what you think that's the absolute minimum. I don't want to lose.
If I ever lost this,
box that up.
Yeah. Yep. Or get them scanned first, in that digital area.
Yeah. And have those priorities. That might be, something to consider too.
Yeah. And that'll be different for everyone depending on their situation and their location. And if they're in an apartment style, and they've, their natural disaster is something like earthquakes, and they're looking at, they've got or tornadoes in the States, if they're looking at an area there that they know that they need to prepare and. Obviously in all of our dealings with the fire brigade and the different sort of notifying people, the notification process, and informing others of plans and things like that. So what would you do in your case? Like, as far as if you do, say, someone said, okay, I'm going to now write down my disaster plan. What's that sort of step look like for you as far as in the informing of people?
Yeah, look, I would say you just give a copy of that to someone you trust, another family member, friends, and not so much actually, I think, what you're going to do in the emergency, but mainly also information about what are you storing and where.
Yes, okay.
So that other people would know, okay, they've got a storage unit there and there, number so-and-so, so that they, in an emergency, they could possibly access it and know where to go and look for things.
Yes.
So it's not lost because, if nobody knows, they're not going to find it.
And even where the key, where a spare key might be, or something
things
like that.
Yeah. So I would share that with someone trusted.
Yep. Absolutely, and how they can access that. Yeah. I think that's a really important step because, and the fact that we're talking about other documents, and we're going to go through that in a moment as to other things that you can include on as well as the photos. But just a list of what's there, and you just in a disaster, there's so many things that just take priority and precedence over everything else, and these things, I wish I had that, or I wish I knew, or the different. It just that preparation. It really can, and it can be a relief, I think, from the emotional side of things, dealing with that, when you're in the thick of it.
Look, even if this is too much to prepare and to box things up and what have you, at the very minimum, I would say have at least a checklist so that you can grab and run through the house and gather you things that you want in an emergency, at the very least, because as we said before, the brain is not operating.
It's clearly. Like that one special thing that was a family heirloom, or it was a grandmother's something, and I know that there's a few things that it wouldn't mean anything to anybody else, but to me,
of course.
And you know what they are when you're not under that pressure.
Yes,
you can list those things.
Yeah.
You know where they are. Even if it's in a an unorganized way, you usually know the area and the roughly. And that's fine if that works. And
so at least have that list with these things, so
definitely.
you can quickly go and grab them.
Fantastic.
Okay.
All right, so then moving on to what we would say that plan B. So let's think about preparing for the worst, but in an ideal world. So an ideal situation. So if we knew what was coming rather than it just coming upon us, but we had a bit of time to prepare, what additional types of things would you consider?
Well, we're talking about photos here, so ideally everything would be digitized and backed up.
Yes.
At all times.
In an ideal world.
In an ideal world.
Yeah.
And we all know very few people have that. Again, confessions of photo organisers.
Yeah.
We haven't digitized everything either, or not yet. We're
not
getting
yet.
there.
I know.
It's a long process. So, but ideally, and as you can imagine, if you are at that point where everything I care for has been digitized, it's backed up, it's in the cloud, then this might be enough. Okay, I've got that peace of mind.
Yep.
Anything can happen. I've got it safe. It's all there. You might still want to think whether there are a few albums maybe or printed photos or whatever that you would want to save. And then what we discussed before comes into play, of course. So you can mix that up. You might not worry about taking your computer when you need to run because it's all backed up.
Exactly.
So that's a relief already.
But I think look, in an ideal world, it is the best foolproof way, and we talk about our 3-2-1 backup method. So know that you've got other copies off-site or cloud storage, and so then you've got that peace of mind. So what are some of the other things that we could just give some ideas and things that are in addition to photos to maybe look at?
In
sort of grabbing the obvious ones, passport, things that are just going to take time and money to reproduce. One of the good ones that insurance policies, phone numbers for those types of things to start to rebuild and things like that. But you've had some experience sort of in this other area, especially with documentation. So what's your experiences and other advice?
So look, it's mainly all the personal documents, as you said, the passport, the birth certificates, divorce certificates, death certificates, all these things, driver's license, that's all the personal stuff. Then things to have about anything that proves your assets, like saving accounts on your bank and what have you. Insurance is another category.
Yep.
Very important. Bank account information in general, whether that's assets or debts, whatever, credit card information. Passwords is a good one to have safe. These days there is password apps, so you don't have to write them down somewhere, but it's good to have, even if you use an app like that, that somebody trusted again has your master password to access all that. Exactly. And it's not only having a scan of all these documents, which is great, but to actually also why not write it down in a document what you have and where is the original stored. That's very helpful, and again, that's something that you can easily pass on to a trusted person that can access that information if ever need to be, especially medical and legal information. Medical is not to be underestimated because and that's not necessarily natural disaster now, but if you have an accident and you're unconscious in hospital, who can access your medical history? Maybe you're not in the hospital where your information is stored, or maybe they can't access your usual doctor,
Yeah.
and it might become really critical and can be life-saving if somebody
have access
can
to
access
that.
that information.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's something to think about and to
prepare for.
To prepare for.
Yeah.
And I sort of, it's, I think it should be dealt with the same way as you do with photos.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's go through some of these best practice on what to do. So if someone's now looking at saying, okay, I've been inspired to take some action, what are some of the things that we've covered today? So we've definitely covered writing down the plan.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's a really important process and a step that we would say is a best practice in this situation when you're looking at doing something and thinking about that natural disaster season or location that you might be in, or as we've talked about, not even a natural disaster but just a disaster that has happened. And what else, Chantal?
Inform somebody you trust.
Yep.
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
They were also saying plan enough time to digitize. So if this is something that you're able to calmly think about, just even put together some steps. It might take you 6 months or a year, or just something small, and taking some steps. Just give yourself enough time to digitize. Definitely.
Again, that's where the priorities come in.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
And next one
that's another one. Test your backups regularly. So you might run the backups. Hopefully you do.
Yes.
But it's also good to sometimes go back and check whether the backup is actually happening the way it should be.
Yeah.
And maybe try to restore a file or two just to test that everything works as it should. Not that, you've got a bad awakening one day when you rely on the backup and then you find that it didn't back up properly.
Yeah.
So and that's, that's
just
best practice for
absolutely
at any time.
Yeah. And of course, one of our favorites is just do it. Take action. We really encourage you. It really is. Being in this industry, we just hear it. We hear it, unfortunately, too often. But we really just encourage you to take some action, pop a plan down, and do it. Yeah. I think we've covered everything.
We have.
I think so. So thanks again for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Please reach out to us if there's something specific, if there's something personal in a natural disaster that you've had an experience with, we'd love to be able to help in any way, but please reach out. We've got all our details in the show notes. And thanks again, Chantal.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening. Bye for now.
See you. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of DIY photo organising and found some inspiration, useful tips and strategies to support your photo projects.
We'd love to invite you to pop over to our Facebook page, DIY Photo Organising, and we welcome your questions, feedback and any future topics that you'd like us to cover. If there is someone you'd love to share this with, please click on share to help others take control of their photos too. Remember, have a look through our show notes for links to helpful information. I'm Fiona from Photo Helper.
And I'm Chantal from Simply in Order Photo Organising. And remember, we believe in you and you can do this.